Fratelli Tutti is a social encyclical standing out for its use of the parable of the Good Samaritan as a key to read the entire document. I present this paper with a presupposition. A text is a result of a dialogue with a context. I call it pretext, or some philosophers prejudice, that has led to the exposition, and with the context that is envisaged through a critical analysis of the pretext. For the understanding of a text, it is necessary to take into consideration the wider social, religious, and material context that gives rise to it. Pope Francis, in his exposition of the parable of the Good Samaritan, employs a complementary approach, making use of the historical critical method and a contextual and a reader-oriented analysis. The pretext of the parable spoken by Jesus were: 1. Apprehensive relationship between the Jews and the Samaritans due to the superiority claims of one over the other. The narrow understanding of the concept of neighbor as one who belongs to one's own clan. Through the question of the lawyer, who is my neighbor, and the inverted relationality of the priest and the Levite on the one hand, and the Samaritan on the other, to the wounded Jew attacked and abandoned on the road, Jesus presented the pretext of the parable which he intends to correct through his text. This is done through the character of the Good Samaritan. The Samaritan's attitude towards a wounded person on the roadside sets the agenda of the new way envisaged by Jesus. The message is loud and clear. Open the horizon and go beyond ethnic, religious, and legal borders in identifying one's neighbor in the needy and the wounded. The oral and the written text set the ambience for the establishment of a new context, implementing the spirit of the text, which is the vision delineated in the Lucan narrative. Now let us come to the document of Fratelli Tutti. The pretext of the document are the following: the parable of the Good Samaritan, inspiration from St. Francis of Assisi's life, who showed openness of heart, which knew no bounds and transcended differences of origin, nationality, color, or religion. Third one, the wounded stranger, abandoned on the roadside due to closed worldviews and shattered dreams. We call it present-day attempts to eliminate or ignore the other. Then the immediate pretext is the pandemic, COVID-19. In this encyclical, Pope attempts to bring to the fore the two immutable paradigms available to us from the pretext, so that the prevailing negative components of the pretext can be won over, so that human fraternity and social friendship can become the law or the rule that governs humanity. This is attainable only when dignity of each person is truly acknowledged. So the text of Fratelli Tutti envisages a future context where the positive values taught by the parable and St. Francis would be a reality. Recognizing the fact that alienation caused by various factors have made humanity a group of strangers traveling estranged, Fratelli Tutti critically posits a journey of togetherness as fellow travelers sharing the same flesh, as children of the same earth, our common home, appreciating one another of richness of different cultures, beliefs, and traditions. Based on the various characters in the parable of the Good Samaritan, the Pope explains further the deliberations that led to the writing of this encyclical. The priest and the Levite adopt an indifferent attitude of ignoring the wounded, probably because they saw helping the wounded was time-consuming and probably upsetting their religious and social schedules. When their inaction posed a threat to the life of the wounded, there comes the Good Samaritan like an elixir of life. For the Samaritan, the sight of the person who was suffering was not a disturbance at all. Rather, it was heart-wrenching. Splangixomai, the Greek text. that made him to spend time and money in rescuing him. According to the Pope, since we are illiterate, when it comes to accompanying, caring for, and supporting the most frail and vulnerable members of our developed societies, we often fall into the temptation to ignore others, especially the weak. We consider paying attention to them is a disturbance. Consequently, many adopt the so-called nervous indifference of the priest and the Levite, simply ignoring the existence of the poor or the wounded. Pope finds an implied pretext to the present unholy collusion between those who manipulate and cheat society and those who, while claiming to be detached and impartial critics, leave off that system and its benefit in the characters of the thief, the priest, and or the Levite. The example of the Samaritan gives us an alternative to the prevailing culture of exclusion of people who are different from us and those who are weak and vulnerable. The Good Samaritan included the wounded stranger on the roadside into his program. The exclusion and inclusion portrayed in the parable give us a criterion for judging every economic, political, social, and religious project. Each day we have to decide whether to be good Samaritans or indifferent bystanders. Inclusive approach of the Good Samaritan who thinks beyond himself is the basis for inclusive social friendship. The idea of existential neighbor and foreigner is running throughout the document. The need to pay attention to the marginalized in our neighborhood is also a significant idea. Again, in Article 101, the Pope employs the key of the Good Samaritan in order to speak of the need to go beyond the trend of the world of, very interesting idea, associates, and to work for transcending the narrow considerations of their identity and their closed and self-referential structures, which prevent people from helping those who are in need. The future context that is envisaged by Fratelli Tutti is an open and inclusive approach to the weaker sections of humanity without being choked by social, political, economic, and religious fragmentations and exclusivism. What we need is a realistic social covenant, which includes respectful openness to different worldviews, cultures, and lifestyles. This should be reciprocal. That is actually the current issue. Somebody already asked what would be the answer to us in the context of various attacks in France. So the openness to worldviews, cultures, and lifestyles should be reciprocal. It should not be one-sided. The compassionate act of the Samaritan comes from his understanding of the dignity of human being, tarnished by robbery and deprived by indifference. So I would say he becomes a prophetic archetype of a kind person who is willing to set everything else aside in order to show interest, to give the gift of a smile, to speak a word of encouragement, and to listen amid general indifference. So the invitation to engage in meaningful dialogue based on the principle that we are all traveling companions, truly brothers and sisters, seems to refer back to the parable of the Good Samaritan. So the pretext, text, and context of the parable of the Good Samaritan becomes a key to understand Fratelli Tutti. As with any parable, so I conclude, the reader or the hearer is given with the challenging task of analyzing the messages conveyed through the characters by critically evaluating them and pondering whether one resembles any of these characters, and finally to decide which character I need to identify with. So by reading Fratelli Tutti, using the key of the Good Samaritan, we are challenged to strive for social friendship, going beyond all borders, inclusive of all people of goodwill and reciprocal openness. So that is my conclusion. So Good Samaritan play a key role as the pretext, text, and the context of the encyclical. Thank you.
a question, please?
Yeah, go ahead with your question.
Yeah,
Tell your name and then.
I am Father Jinosh VM, CMI from Mysore Province.
Okay.
I have a question to Father Joy now, Father Joy Philip. Father Joy, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Father, thank you for your wonderful presentation. Now you are relating it to Good Samaritan. My question is regarding nervous indifference. Nervous indifference. See, in Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, verse 40, truly I tell you, just as you did to one of the least of these one who are members of my family, you did it to me. So we have to take care of the family of Jesus Christ. Those are hungry, poor people. So can we connect that one like that way?
Yeah. First of all, that translation of Matthew 25:40 in English may not be the exact one. If you take the Greek one and see its nuances, it may not be belongs to. We can interpret it narrow way or in a general way. The family of humanity. Probably, if we take in that sense. Otherwise, Jesus may not make any difference between the Jewish understanding of neighbor and the newness he wanted to teach. So I think that the Greek text should be correctly understood and translated. There are versions which translate this way, as you said, but actually the correct interpretation should be, if you read the Greek, I don't have time for that one, yes. It should be in the sense of the family of humanity.
Okay, thank you so much, Father.
Okay, we will take one more question. Anybody?
Hello.
Yeah, yes, please.
I am Father Philip, and my question is to Reverend Dr. Joey Philip Kakkanattu. So thank you for your wonderful exposition of the Good Samaritan. And I understand when Pope says that the death penalty is inadmissible, and I understand in connection with the Good Samaritan. But my question is not then his teaching on the death penalty a contradiction with the magisterial tradition of the church and scripture on the same topic?
The question is actually a little complicated. First of all, actually, the Pope's teaching on the death penalty question may not be very based on the question of Good Samaritan. And the tradition of the Catholic Church and the Catholic teaching is always against death penalty. It is coming from not toccare caino, the very famous sentence from Italian, or in Book of Genesis. Though God said, I'm going to punish Cain, simultaneously God said, nobody should touch Cain. So, of course, God can punish, but at the same time, human being is not given the permission to take life away, because life is a gift and the author of life is God. So only God can take life. That may be, I think, the theological and biblical basis of arguing against the death penalty. So the church does not.
Is he then denying the very principle of retributive justice in that regard?
Oh, it's maybe we may not be having time to enter into a discussion about that one.
Okay, thank
you. Actually, retributive justice does not mean death. There are so many other ways also implementing retributive justice. All the world, I think the developed countries and almost all nations are having means and measures for implementing retributive justice. However, without taking life away, because if you take life away, the possibility of retributive justice is over. The rest is given to God then. So, okay,
thank you. Thank you so much.